Welcome back to another episode of the Corporate Gossip Podcast. Before we start, a couple of notes. First, we recorded this episode before the writer's strike ended on September 26th, so you're going to want to stay tuned at the end of the episode for an update on the story. Next, my favorite thing, thanking the people who bought us coffee this week. Only one this week, Brandon I. Thank you, Brandon. If you want to support the podcast and get a shout out, you can do so by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link in our show notes. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Get ready with me while I tell you about David Zaslav's Flop Girl Summer. It was supposed to be the best summer ever for Zaslav. May marked his 1-year anniversary of being appointed CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, which in turn had made him one of the biggest boss boys in Hollywood. He's in control of over 100 entertainment assets across the globe, including HBO, TBS, TNT, TCM, CNN, HLM, Cartoon Network, Animal Planet, TLC, HGTV, and more. His private jet had just touched down in New York City from Las Vegas CinemaCon, where he shared a stage with Oprah and was photographed on the red carpet with Steven Spielberg. He had just announced a new streaming service with the best name ever, Max. And to top it all off, last year's paycheck just hit the bank, $250 million in salary and stock options. It's giving robber baron chic. And he was ready to celebrate. First, a star-studded, opulent shindig at the Cannes Film Festival. This would be his coming out party as a Hollywood hotshot. On the invite list, Scarlett Johansson, Martin Scorsese, and the cast of an HBO show called The Idol, which Zaslav was sure would be a total hit. After Cannes, he'd make his triumphant return to Boston University, where he got his law degree. There, he was scheduled to make a rousing commencement address. In it, he planned to channel the ghost of his idol and former mentor, Jack Welch. But unfortunately for David Zaslav, things were about to take a turn. You know that scene in Heavyweights where Jerry Garner's last day of school, first day of summer euphoria is abruptly deflated when Jeffrey Tambor announces he's being sent to fat camp?
Plans for this summer. I'm gonna hang out.
Well, just like the Blob, David Zaslav's dreams of spending the summer cosplaying as Jay Gatsby would be publicly and mercilessly punctured.
But even worse, today he killed the Blob.
First, the writers and actors strike. Ugh! All these poor normies parading down Santa Monica Boulevard demanding things like a cost of living adjustment and residuals. What the hell even are residuals? Zaslav made his bones churning out high-volume, low-budget reality TV programs like 90 Day Fiancé, Toddlers and Tiaras, Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, and Sex Sent Me to the ER. No one on these shows got residuals, so why can't these strikers be more like Mama June? But what do CEOs always like to say? Something, something adversity, something, something bravery. Well, that's exactly what Zaslav did. His inner circle suggested that holding the party at Cannes a week after the writers announced a strike might look out of touch, maybe garish and miserly, but nevertheless, Zaslav persisted. Resolutely, he laced up his $1,000 loafers, donned his beigest linen suit, took a flute of Dom Perignon to the face, and partied his little butt off. "I've been working hard for this party," the grinning Zaslav told reporters. Wow, inspirational stuff. Across the ocean, the gathering of rich idiots was widely criticized, but no one in the room that night would tell Zaslav to his face what a turd he was. They'd leave that to the Boston grads who, just a week later, would live out what I can only imagine is a fantasy shared by many listeners of this podcast. Being seated in front of a wealth-extracting, layoff-loving, finger-pointing, Jack Welch wannabe billionaire, and together with thousands of other graduates shouting,
"Fuck you, you piece of shit."
Whew, that felt good. For us, not for him. Zaslav kept his sunglasses on the whole time and had to give his whole speech over pro-union chanting. Certainly not the homecoming he was hoping for. Believe it or not, Zaslav's summer from hell wasn't over yet. 1 week later, he'd have to shit-can his good friend Chris Licht from the top spot at CNN. A month after that, he'd experienced the Streisand effect for himself when he strong-armed a GQ editor into purging an article critical of his CEO performance, which made a viral moment out of what otherwise might have been a forgettable story. So here we are, summer is over, and while the rest of us are sun-kissed, arms stacked with friendship bracelets and backpacks weighed down by boondoggles, David Zaslav is in the corner, sitting crisscross applesauce on a pile of money, and at least for now, unable to part with a few pennies to compensate the writers and actors who built his empire. This is the Corporate Gossip Podcast, David Zaslav's flop era. Speed! That means go. Welcome back to another episode of the Corporate Gossip Podcast. I'm your host, CPA Scorned, Becca Platsky, here with my brother and my co-host,
Data Analytics Playboy, Adam Platsky.
And today we are talking about David Zaslav. So our last episode, we talked about Ted Turner and CNN, and we kind of left it off. We mentioned that David Zaslav was picking at Turner's legacy like it was a rack of buffalo wings at Ted's Montana Grill, and he was just licking his little fingies in delight. So that's where we're going to pick up. We are going to meet the latest victim of the bosses of the Warner Corporation, Chris Licht, who until recently was the CEO of CNN. And then we're going to meet the main character of this episode, David Zaslav. So the first piece of corporate gossip is, with friends like David Zaslav, who needs enemies? Zaz fires his pain sponge, Chris Licht, on their morning walk in Central Park under the apocalyptic orange haze of the Canadian wildfires. We talked about the history of CNN in the last episode, but I want to touch down on the gossip that got us into the story in the first place. This is the super dramatic ouster of Chris Licht after an embarrassing and extremely high-profile expose, a 15,000-word profile by The Atlantic's Tim Alberta. And the reason I'm starting with this story is because it just completely blew up this summer. And it illustrates like how toxic CNN has become since we left it with Turner in the last episode. Before Licht was at CNN, he already had a pretty impressive career. He's showrunner of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He's CBS's executive vice president of special programming, and he was really involved with Morning Joe. And he's behind the reboot of CBS This Morning. So he's handpicked by Warner Brother Discovery CEO David Zaslav to be the CEO of CNN. Zaslav didn't interview anybody else. The previous CEO, Jeff Zucker, was kind of like a Ted Turner figure. He was beloved by the network, but he got canned. Do you know why?
No, why did he get canned?
For having an affair with a coworker.
Was she under him?
I mean, he was the CEO, so she would have had to be below him. It was kind of like you couldn't really come back from that at that point. So Chris Licht joins after this beloved CEO is fired unceremoniously. And Zaslav kind of sets him up for failure. Get this. Remember CNN Plus?
Yeah, my mother was so excited for CNN Plus.
Our mom was probably one of the 8 people who had signed up for CNN Plus.
Early access.
Was so excited for it to drop. And it was canceled before it even hit the market. There was an entire team and years of effort that had gone into creating CNN Plus. And Licht was scheduled to start work on like May 1st. On April 20th, Zaslav says, "Hey, Licht, I've decided that we need to fire everybody in CNN Plus. We're canceling the project, and you're the one who has to fire them." So this guy, before he even starts, before his first day, he has to fire a huge chunk of people
some
at CNN.
pre-onboarding work. Yeah. Social security number, make sure your payment elections are done, and can 200 people. Yeah.
So, like, I don't know any CEO who's going to come in with a great attitude after that experience. So Zaslav tells Licht that he wants CNN to be more moderate, have more Republican voices on, and because what they really want to do is pull viewers away from Fox News. And this just feels like an absolutely losing strategy. I'm no media expert, but I don't know anybody who currently watches Fox News who's like, "Oh, did you hear Rick Santorum's on the 12 o'clock hour of CNN? Let's switch over to that." Like, nobody's going to actually do that. And so I'm not sure why that was the strategy. I think they were highly delulu in their thinking that they were going to pull viewers from Fox.
No, I mean, I think the Fox viewers, much like the CNN viewers, are switching channels to hate watch, right? Like,
Yes.
I watch, I watch either to hate view.
It's possible. But I don't know that it would be sizable enough to make a difference in terms of advertisers. So the Atlantic's Tim Alberta has access to Licht over several months, and the findings that were published were so cringe. As soon as it's published, everyone's like, this is a fucking dumpster fire. And so I want to go over a few key moments in the article, but it's linked in our show notes and you have to read it. So one of the big issues that Licht is dealing with is he's got this directive from Zaslav to bring more Republican voices to CNN. And so the biggest way he's going to do that is by hosting a Trump town hall with, what's her face? Who hosted it?
Oh, I love her.
Yeah.
Caitlin Collins.
Caitlin Collins. Isn't she dating Shep Rose?
She was, according to a blind, she was seen walking around the West Village with Shep Rose. I saw Caitlin Collins at the American Bar like 6 months ago.
And who was she with?
She drank 2 martinis.
Wow.
And we were only there for like an hour. So, hey, but she probably knew this was coming, so she needed to deal with it. So
Caitlin Collins hosts this absolute debacle of a town hall on CNN. Just to describe this Trump town hall, if you didn't watch it, here are some highlights. He demeaned E. Jean Carroll, the woman who the day before a jury found him liable for sexually assaulting. He said he would separate families at the border again if he could. He called Caitlin Collins, the moderator and the CNN star and potential girlfriend of Shep Rose, a nasty person, all while the crowd of Trump loyalists cheered. That's the crazy part. This crowd was Trump sycophants.
But if Caitlin Collins is going to be dating Shep Rose, she'll be subject to much worse.
That's true. That's a great point. Can you imagine on Caitlin Collins on the next season of Southern Charm?
That would be quite a career.
There was a ton of backlash for this town hall. Everyone's like, what the fuck? Stop using Trump to improve your ratings. This is an absolute disaster. Before the town hall, CNN journalists are saying like, bro, Licht, this is a bad idea. And Licht told journalists, he goes, the way to deal with a bully like Trump is to confront him with the facts. Where have you been for the past 8 years? Is this your first day on Earth? The town hall was like a Trump infomercial. Dan Rather tweeted, does CNN count that as an in-kind campaign contribution? Most damningly in this expose, it kind of comes out that Licht is Zaslav's pain sponge. Can you go to the next picture, Mike? We have Licht and Zaslav.
Licht on Ozempic.
Yeah.
Go to the picture back. One picture back. That's more recent, right?
Yeah, it talks about Licht being on Ozempic. Yeah, in the article. Licht was previously, he called Zaslav one of his best friends, but people who observed their relationship said that over the previous year, people who knew Zaslav and who had observed his relationship with Licht had depicted him as a control freak, a micromanager, a relentless operator who helicoptered over his embattled CNN leader. And Licht's colleagues felt bad for him. They pitied him, quote unquote. He's getting mangled out there over the CNN town hall and all these other decisions he's making. And a lot of people are thinking that Zaslav is the one pulling the strings. Like, he basically has to do whatever Zaslav tells him, but he's the one who suffers. And ultimately, this profile exposes that Licht was feeling misunderstood, attacked by everybody. His staff, the CNN's audience, his peers, and the media. His predecessor, Jeff Zucker, who is like, on, again, I think every single episode this season we've done, there's been a smear campaign, and Zucker's on a smear campaign against Licht. So David Zaslav fires him, and an interim CEO comes in who was one of David Zaslav's right-hand man. And a CNN reporter said, you know, when Licht leaves, it's just going to be another big fight against who takes over. They said that Licht is nothing but a Zaslav patsy, but now they're stuck with Zaslav's actual capo. And I think it's interesting because Zaslav sent a memo to employees after Licht was fired, and he was like, I take responsibility for what happens, which is why this guy got fired. They did just announce that Mark Thompson is going to take over from Chris Licht recently.
I think Tim Alberta put it best where Chris Licht played himself, as DJ Khaled said. Yeah. Congratulations.
You played yourself. So that's the background on Chris Licht. That's where we leave CNN off. I'm sure we'll probably do another catch-up episode on CNN because it seems like there's going to be even more drama this year. But let's now dive into David Zaslav. Are you ready for the next piece of corporate gossip?
Bring it.
All right. Now for the Zaslav portion of the episode. So, corporate gossip number 2.
This is a good picture. It looks... You couldn't pick a better villain picture.
Who makes that face, like, wholeheartedly? Like, without any sense of irony?
We're only 1 degree separated from David Zaslav.
We are. We have a college friend who was his neighbor growing up. Yeah, so right now you're seeing a picture of David Zaslav. If you could imagine, close your eyes and imagine like a truly insufferable CEO who thinks they are the absolute tits, and you see them and they go, hey, and they literally wink and do finger guns at you. That's David Zaslav. Oh, and notoriously, he loves branded vests. That came out in my research. A very unique trait among CEOs.
Like what type of branded vest? Like any company
Like
logo?
He loves a company branded vest.
Oh, okay.
And that looks like a nice one. It looks like neoprene on the outside and maybe some type of cotton on the inside. They just love free shit, huh? Piece of corporate gossip number 2 is in the year 2023, the same year that CEOs have pissed away $44 billion on a social media app, killed 5 people on an ill-fated trip to the Titanic, and challenged each other to cage matches, David Zaslav is still in the running for dumbest CEO of the year. So the reason that Zaslav is so important in this story is he is the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, a company that was created after the merger of 2 companies, Warner Brothers and Discovery, and owns many brands that you know, like TLC, HBO, and of course, CNN.
And Discovery.
Yeah. These are the networks that are under the Warner Brothers Discovery network. So if you're watching any of these are Zaslav networks now. So Cartoon Network, TBS, TNT, True TV, TCM, Discovery, Animal Planet, Destination America, OWN, Science Channel, Travel Channel, HGTV, Investigation Discovery, Food Network, TLC, HBO, Cinemax, Magnolia Network,
Cooking Channel,
CNN, HLN, MLB Network, NBA, Motor Trend, Golf Digest, and DC Comics.
NBA TV, MLB TV, Motor Trend Group, Golf. Oh, you said Golf Digest. They own NCAA.com, NBA.com, PGA.com. They own Bleacher Report along with House of Highlights.
Oh, and Warner Brothers, the movie studio.
And Warner Brothers, the movie studio. That's right. I mean, yeah, you would. If you watch TV, this has touched your life.
Yeah. So.
Oh, Bravo New Zealand.
Bravo New Zealand.
Bravo New Zealand.
Real Housewives of Auckland.
Auckland.
Do you think Bravo New Zealand does Below Deck, but it's all just American ships?
Yeah. Below Deck Galveston.
Below Deck Ozarks.
So here's a little background on Zaslav, because you've probably heard of him recently as the core villain of the writer's strike, which he earned that title, but I think it's helpful to understand where he's coming from. So he is a lawyer by trade. Early in his career, he's working as a junior lawyer at CNBC, and that means he's working a few levels below, guess who? Jack Welch. He loves Jack Welch. I mean, he's not alone at the time, right? Here's a quote. This is a former NBC insider. David always attached himself to the higher up boss. He was very good at managing up, and he knows how to get somebody to buy into him. And I don't know the professional version of social climbing. I guess it would be like brown nosing, but Zaslav seems to be the king of brown nosing. Last week we discussed Ted Turner. Ted's this renegade, like Kanye West, cannot be managed. Zaslav, on the other hand, is just a supreme butt kisser. And another important character that he's sucking up to is billionaire John Malone. He's a cable mogul of the time, and he's still one of America's richest men. We'll hear about him in the story too. He's a key board member and a shareholder in Warner Brothers Discovery, and he's one of these big influences trying to moderate CNN. Mm-hmm. Here's a story that Zaslav tells about how he's staying in the office overnight to dazzle Malone and Welch. This is from the New York article from last month called David Zaslav, Hollywood Antihero. So Zaslav tells a story of staying in the office late one night to wait for a call from Malone. When his boss arrives the next morning and found him still there, Zaslav explained why he hadn't left his post. You said I should wait for John Malone to call, so I did. His boss got Jack Welch on the phone and goes, this guy stayed all night. Can you believe this guy? And years later, Zaslav would say, that was it. They said, you're our guy. He talks about Welch and Malone as his most important mentors. He says, the conflation of Welch and Malone is my brain. Welch, with his obsession of layoffs, and Malone, who fetishizes tax avoidance, real good role models and indicative of what's to come.
So he made his bones acting as an answering machine?
I would say if half of your brain is Jack Welch, you should get a lobotomy. So John Malone is a big shareholder in Discovery. He's on the board of directors, and he plucks Zaslav from his post at NBC to become Discovery CEO. Then they merge Warner Brother and Discovery, and Zaslav becomes CEO of both companies. This is a quote about John Malone from a media executive who's known him for decades. He says, John Malone has a great facility for finding people that he thought were competent and giving them enormous opportunity that would not have been available almost at first blush. He tells Zaslav, here's this new company. You need to take it public and you need to grow internationally. What do you think the first thing is that he does if he is possessed by the spirit of Jack Welch?
Did you say cut costs?
Layoffs. Lots of execs and a quarter of the staff are shit canned. I think that's probably where he was inspired to tell Chris Licht, what you should do before you even get onto the job? Lay off 200 people. Worked great for me. This is a quote from John Malone about what Zaslav did at Warner Brothers Discovery. He goes, there were some real turkey businesses there. Zaslav had to take them out behind the barn and shoot them. People were coming in at 9:30, heading out at 6. He wanted those people gone. God, can you imagine? Let's get rid of the people with kids.
Yeah, the kids, right? The people who just want to clock in, clock out. They're worthless.
Fuck them. So here's again from a New Yorker article about the type of people that Zaslav likes to fire and the type of people Zaslav likes to hire. While some of his top executives are women, Zaslav is swayed easily by a certain kind of person who talks a certain kind of way, and they all tend to be white men. They have to be very confident, have a big swagger. Having a bad reputation can also actually be a good thing in his eyes because it means you're tough. So when Zaslav joins Discovery in 2006, its name is kind of indicative of its programming, Discovery, like TLC, which stands for the Learning Channel. It's got programming like A Baby Story. Remember A Baby Story?
No, but I remember Crocodile Hunter.
Crocodile Hunter, documentaries about sharks and dinosaurs, a show called Great Books that happened to be canceled the year that Zaslav took over. It ran for 13 years. It was created by Walter Cronkite. It took in-depth looks at history's greatest fiction and nonfiction literature. Boring.
Who needs books? We'll just make movies about books. That way you don't have to fucking waste your time.
Zaslav, he's just like us. He wants to sit back with a glass of Pinot Grigio and just let the trash TV just wash all over him. And when John and Kate Plus 8 become blockbuster, the year after he takes over, he realizes he's got a winning strategy and he's just going to run it back over and over again. Shows that are greenlit over the next 10 years include Toddlers and Tiaras, I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant, My Strange Addiction, Mall Cops, Mall of America, and I'm sure other iterations of that franchise, Extreme Couponing, Sarah Palin's Alaska, Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, Best Funeral Ever, Sex Sent Me to the ER.
You're missing one.
Oh, what?
My 600-Pound Life.
Oh, Dr. Now.
Dr. Now.
So the thing about this content that he creates is it's dirt cheap. You do not have to pay these reality stars much. And I wouldn't suggest listening to any of her content, but I will say I've learned a lot from Bethany's podcast. Not saying it's all true, but it's certainly accurate that, none of these reality stars in any of these shows are getting any residuals. They're basically just paid for their time once. So you can play Toddlers and Tiaras in perpetuity and just be banking all of that money. The ROI is pretty significant on these shows if you're just talking from a financial perspective. And here's a quote about that. Discovery's model was completely different than the Hollywood content model. says a Discovery executive. It was very low cost content and it was made completely on a non-union basis, owned 100% by Discovery. So just keep that in mind. When we think about the strikes today, David Zaslav became a billionaire on the backs of non-union reality television show stars. So that's his truth. That's what he knows. And here's the thing. Zaslav is incented just to stand at this well and continue to pump it because it's great for Discovery stock, which is, of course, the basis on which he's paid. Discovery IPOs in 2008. That year, his comp is almost $12 million. The next year, his comp is $42 million. The next year, $156.1 million. He's one of the highest paid media executives in America. And by the way, that year where he was paid $156 million, the stock price fell by 25%. Here's a quote from a former colleague at NBC. David is clearly a genius. He's taken probably about $1 billion of stockholder money off the table since he started working for Malone personally. And the thing you need to understand about this merger, because it plays into the strike, is that it was essentially a leveraged buyout.
We love LBOs.
LBOs, baby. This is really unusual in the media business or any business where you're going to have a volatile stock. It basically means that Discovery didn't have the cash to buy Warner Brothers outright, so they had to borrow the cash. And it means that Warner Brothers Discovery has a ton of debt right from the get-go. And Zaslav has a lot of pressure on his back to address that debt for shareholders. And the debt is bad. At an investor conference, Zaslav is complaining that some of Warner Brothers' assets had turned out to be unexpectedly worse than we thought before the deal closed. A Discovery employee told The New Yorker that we knew the debt would be bad, but when the number came out, we were stunned and scared. What's one thing that David Zaslav and Bethany Frankel have in common? They do absolutely no research and then publicly have to eat a huge turd. But Zaslav has no choice. He's got to get her done. And so Malone, his boss, is telling him, you have to, quote unquote, manage your cash, right? That means cost cutting. So Malone told CNBC bonuses for Warner Brothers Discovery's top executive this year are tied to the company's cash flow, along with debt reduction. And investors have no doubt that Zaslav can cost cut his way to the number. A Discovery insider said, he's a great businessman. If you put a number out there, he's going to make that number. He says he's a tractor who will run you down to get to that number. So he's gonna cost cut his way with his hands tied behind his back.
He's a tractor?
That's what he said. Are you ready for corporate gossip number 3?
Yeah.
Piece of corporate gossip number 3 is, I think David Zaslav is just here for the zipline. So when Zaslav takes the reins, he gave the company the slogan, the stuff that dreams are made of, a nod to the classic film, The Maltese Falcon. And at the time, John Oliver points out that Zaslav may have misunderstood the quote. Here's a clip from that episode of Last Week Tonight.
A quick note. The stuff that dreams are made of is a quote from the Maltese Falcon about how the thing that seemed like a priceless treasure was actually worthless garbage that brought chaos and despair to everyone around it. Anyway, good luck with the merger. I'm sure everything's going to go great.
So people start to realize that, like, maybe David Zaslav's experience with Kate Gosselin and Mama June isn't going to translate into Hollywood. So he's like, shit, I got to figure this out fast. So he pulls a La La Kent, moves into the Beverly Hills Hotel, and he starts meeting with these, like, Hollywood, what would you call them?
Moguls.
Moguls.
These guys are the guys behind every good actor and actress, right?
Yeah, these people know Hollywood better than anybody. Brian Lord, Ari Emanuel, Michael Ovitz. You'll remember Michael Ovitz from our Disney episode back in season 1. And these meetings that he's having with these folks from agencies and other Hollywood institutions are not going well. A source that was in one of those meetings said that Zaslav's team fumbled through even easy interactions. They were asking these painfully basic questions about residuals. How do long-term payments work for reruns, DVD sales, and other repeat airings? Because remember, Zaslav never had to pay residuals to any one of his assets before. He never had to pay shit to Mama June other than the time that she spent filming. And Zaslav just doesn't understand or care about the product he's selling, according to these interactions. Like, warning, this is the only time this is ever going to happen on this podcast that I'm actually going to give Elon Musk give him a little bit of credit, which is whether or not you think Elon is doing a good job running Twitter, at least he uses the product and he likes the product, okay? On the other hand, you have David Zaslav, who I don't even think watches movies. There's a quote from one of his consiglieres defending his interest in movies. This is Mike DeLuca, who's a chairperson of Warner Brothers Entertainment. He talks about when Zaslav was at CinemaCon, and DeLuca tells The Hollywood Reporter, he talks about being a kid from Brooklyn, growing up at the movies, and how there's nothing like the experience of sharing a movie with an audience. And because he's sincere about it, it moves people emotionally, and that's a big boon for us. So there's so much to unpack in this quote. Like, somebody saying that they went to the movies growing up. Who the fuck didn't go to the movies growing up? And that's a big boon for us. And I hope the CEO of a movie company cares about movies. And the fact that you really have to reach that far for like one of the most uninspiring quotes of all time to say, yeah, no, he watches movies for sure. He goes to CinemaCon and he gives a rousing speech. This is a quote from David Zaslav. It's a moment when people need to be entertained. It's a moment when people need to be inspired. Content and story are more powerful than armies.
Corny.
Tell that to the Ukrainians. The fuck? That is so lame.
That's like, that would be something if we were watching like a media executive movie speaking, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that would be something that you would expect to see in a movie, like, not actually happened in real life. And people ate that shit up, huh?
You know what's funny is I read through a bunch of Warner Brother Discovery's earnings report, and I will say this guy fucking loves a military metaphor. Like, he talks about the attack strategy, his weaponry, all that stuff. And like, give me a fucking break. This guy wouldn't last a day in Nam. He'd be first in line to get a doctor's note for shin splints. He has this like conspicuous unfamiliarity with the product he's now responsible for. And that has headline making consequences. Remember we talked about when Turner bought MGM and then had to sell it back. But in that process, he got a bunch of movie assets, which turned into Turner Classic Movies. This is beloved by people who love movies. Like if you're into movies, this is where your one-stop shop, right? Zaslav fires a significant chunk of TCM leadership, including senior executives who've been at the company for decades and were totally beloved. This journalist, Matthew Baloney from Puck, I think puts it perfectly. So he says, the TCM situation is basically every David Zaslav controversy at Warner Brothers rolled into one. He professes an undying love for an asset, fires the people who made it what he says he loved in the first place, thus causing everybody to loudly freak out, which then leads to Zaz recommitting to the future of the asset, albeit vaguely and in a PR stunty way. So right after he fires a bunch of them, he unfires them after Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg show up at his office and is like, what the fuck are you doing? And he loves Hollywood hotshots. So he'll literally do anything these directors and actors tell him to do. He also decides to squash really good television in favor of programming like Dana White's Power Slap.
So what else did he squash?
He squashed like different TV programs that were in process. Batgirl, which was completely basically done with production, but he slashed it for a tax
who was
write-off.
starring in Batgirl?
Brendan Fraser was the bad guy. That was supposed to be his comeback movie before The Whale. And I don't remember the name of the girl.
Yeah, didn't they spend like $300 million?
Yeah, so he cut it for he wanted a tax write-off. So this is an interesting thing. He also changed the way that the credits were formatted on HBO Max. He basically took away the title director, writer, producer and lumped them all together as creators, which just shows like a very A, lack of understanding, B, lack of respect for all the people who put everything they have into making these movies and television shows.
He's never shown respect for writers and
clearly,
right? Writers, directors, producers, except for famous directors that he wants to wheel and deal with.
Absolutely. Yeah. One other thing he gave us was the movie The Flash, which did not do well, but he said was one of the best superhero movies of all time. So that just shows his understanding of
Superhero movies?
Movies in general. So one quote that I found really interesting was from Kenneth Lehrer, media executive, and he said, of all the CEOs I've worked with over 40 years, he is the most hands-on. He gets an idea and he just forces it until there's a decision. Can you imagine the guy who thinks that Flash is the best superhero movie ever created is super hands-on with all of these writers and producers? Like, they probably cannot fucking stand him. But the truth is, Zaslav wasn't chosen to run Warner Brothers Discovery because he has any meaningful cinematic proficiency or appreciation. He's not creative in the regular way. He's creative in the financial way. And just like our MBA friends say, take your fine arts degree and shove it. The board of directors chose Zaslav because he will run you down with a tractor to make his numbers, or he is the tractor that's running you down.
He is the tractor. That's how I understood the quote.
And the board of directors also chose him because he went to one of the best undergraduate institutions in America. In the world?
Damn near.
SUNY Binghamton.
SUNY Binghamton. That's
and
right.
guys, that's how you know that we truly are unbiased reporters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, fuck this guy. I don't care if I was standing elbow to elbow with him at the Rat. Doesn't matter to me.
He went to our alma mater, and we don't care.
Yeah, there's plenty of people I went to college with that I hate.
So yeah, suck it. But if you want to be a billionaire one day, I would say SUNY Binghamton is probably the best place to jumpstart.
More for less. More for less.
Yeah, more for less. Great value for your money.
Great value. Public Ivy.
The premier public Ivy. Mike, do you have anything to add about Binghamton University?
I'm not sick of hearing about it at all.
Great. So here's how Zaslav is hacking his way out of debt. So let's just kind of bullet list right off the bat. Cuts 25% of the staff at Discovery. He closes CNN Plus. Well, he had Chris Licht close CNN Plus. It lays off 300 staff who are working on the project. He gutted the Cartoon Network. He purges HBO Max of certain shows, including 200 episodes of Sesame Street and the entire Westworld series. He scrapped Scooby-Doo movie, a $90 million Batgirl project, both nearly complete, and wrote them off for tax purposes. And he announced his intention to cut $3 billion in expenses by the end of 2023. By the way, if he just cut his own salary of $300 million, he'd be like 10% there.
Who cuts Elmo?
I know. Well, Zaslav isn't popular among writers, moviegoers, producers, directors. There is one group of people who love them. Can you guess who?
Elmo?
Shareholders?
Shareholders. Exactly right. Shareholders love him. Here's a clip from John Oliver.
HBO Max, it's not TV, it's a series of tax write-offs to appease Wall Street.
There's an article by Seeking Alpha who says the Warner Brothers Discovery investment thesis lies largely on the highly competent management team. And I think what we've learned so far is maybe Zaslav's management is not that competent. You know, people are defending his erratic management style, like when he laid off 40 executives from Turner Classic Movies and then unlaid them off. By the way, at the time, TCM is making 70% profit margins. The people who defend his erratic management say that he's moving fast and breaking things.
Ugh.
I fucking hate when people say that. Stop breaking shit. That is so 2010. That's a lame excuse for a bad at job. What if I told my boss I didn't make a mistake? I was moving fast and breaking things.
I'm failing fast. I'm learning.
Well, there's a difference between failing fast and moving fast and breaking things. I think in this case, you can afford to slow down.
I just don't like the wording of it. I understand the idea. I don't like I agree it's 2010. It's like, all right, let's evolve our thinking a little bit more, maybe educated decisions.
Exactly. But I honestly think when people use that quote, that is the street's defense of executives when they bungle tasks. If you ever hear that quote, just look for an executive who made a huge mistake. Because they have opportunities to learn and they don't. From the beginning of the merger, right? This is from when Zaslav is having those meetings with Brian Lord and Ari Emanuel. A Warner Media executive suggested, hey, it would be really good for you guys at Discovery to spend more time learning how businesses operate, get to know the management of each unit, find out how residuals work before you make any big moves.
Could you imagine being like Ari? Sorry to interrupt. Could you imagine being like Ari Emanuel, being like a captain of industry, and this guy asking you about DVD sales? and be like, wait, the director of Warner Brothers is asking me about DVD. What year are we in?
Seriously. Everybody's like, hey, Zaslav, maybe you should read a book before you go make any big moves.
I canceled books, remember?
Yeah, seriously.
He seems like the kind of guy that would be going to a big meeting and be like, all right, I talked to my granddaughter and this is what the kids are into.
Seriously.
And then he makes his entire season chart based on, my niece says she's really into this, whatever.
He reads one tweet and then acts on it. And according to
Alex Earl, she's going to be huge. Let's blow her out.
So according to a person who was present in those meetings where they told him, hey, like, you should read a book, Zaslav's management team said that they had a different approach. They said, we get in, we fail fast, we learn, and we move on. God damn it. Like, imagine if your boss was like, you should do some research for this project. And you were like, nah, I'm going to wing it. God, it's classic NBA shit. I cannot stand it. Do you want to take a break before the next part?
Yes.
All right, let's take a break, and we'll be right back with David Zaslav getting booed into oblivion at the other BU. You ready for the next piece of corporate gossip?
This is my favorite piece of corporate gossip.
All right. Piece of corporate gossip number 4 is, come on, guys, don't strike. I have plans this summer. I was going to hang out.
That's a nod?
That's a nod to a movie that is, I'd say, almost every episode at this point. Well, every episode at the beginning we reference.
Yeah, we reference it.
I didn't send you to CEO camp.
That doesn't sound like Jeffrey Tambor.
I didn't send you to CEO camp.
I mean, at this point, Heavyweights for this podcast is required watching.
Yeah.
Is that a Warner Brothers asset?
Mm-mm.
Good. So you can watch that without
on Disney
any...
Plus.
Oh, it's an Iger asset.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You can't stray too far away from the farm here.
that's true.
Jobs have been canceled due to lack of my initiative to pay you. Deal with it.
Good. So as you might know, there's a big writer's strike. And briefly, here are their demands. So we have the Screen Actors Guild, or SAG, members to receive 2% of the revenue that shows generate from streaming platforms and wage increases that keep pace with inflation. The Writers Guild of America, or WGA, increase in pay, pension and health funds to keep up with inflation, standardize compensation and residuals, address the abuses of mini rooms, regulate use of material produced using artificial intelligence. Seems pretty reasonable.
Not for Z-Man.
Not for the Z-Man, because he basically put himself in the center of the strike and made himself the villain when he made a decision at the very beginning of the strike to not let these strikes get in the way of his big summer plans. Because he was going to speak at the Boston University commencement ceremony, and that had been planned for a while. I got to do it. I got to get my robe on and dispense my stage advice to the young people. And then I was going to jet to France because I have a star-studded soiree for the Cannes Film Festival planned.
What'd you say?
Star-studded soiree.
Yeah, after that.
For the Cannes.
I believe it's Cannes. Is it Cannes?
It's cons.
Cannes Film Festival.
Canes. Raising Canes.
Film Festival.
Oh, that would be great.
That would be.
That's a brilliant idea for kid to do a chicken finger festival called Canes.
Wow.
Canes Festival.
But everybody who's listening right now, if you hear about the Raising Cane's Film Festival, they got it from our podcast. But you know what? I'll let you have it. So first, the commencement ceremony, where the Boston grads were absolutely down to clown. So Slate reported of the commencement ceremony. Zaslav gets up to give his remarks. 1 minute and 21 seconds into the speech, Zaslav pauses between sentences, and a Boston grad screams out,
Fuck you, you piece of shit.
now he's being haunted by the spirit of Jack Welch.
I have the honor to present David Zaslav for Boston University's honorary degree.
If you want to be successful, you're going to have to figure out how to get along with everyone. And that includes difficult people. Some people will be looking for a fight.
I honestly, in watching that, he does seem like he's freaking out a little bit.
It's got to be embarrassing.
So embarrassing. And his sunglasses are on at the same time. And I fucking love it. Like, he definitely seems a little shaken. Did you hear when he said it's important to get along with everybody, even though some people were looking for a fight? Guess whose fucking quote that was? That's something he learned from Jack Welch. And you forgot the other part of that quote, Zaslav. The secret to a long life is to buy expensive wine and fire people daily. So after the ceremony, this absolute turd, president of Boston University, Robert A. Brown, said that the students were, oh God, this makes me sick. This is the thing that pissed me off more than anything else in this entire episode. The president of a fucking academic institution says that the students were, quote unquote, attempting to implement the cancel culture that has become all too prevalent on university campuses. They thought to make a statement out of passionate conviction, but in the moment, they forgot that in a liberal democracy, personal autonomy and freedom of speech come with responsibilities. He went on to say that the chanting was painful and embarrassing to witness. In the words of Kristen Doty, suck a dick, Robert. How many of these graduates have English degrees and hope to maybe, I don't know, one day make it to the middle class as a writer? A dream that the turd that you just put on the fucking stage is making unattainable? Imagine being a president of a university, no doubt, where your alumni are drowning in student debt and defending a billionaire over your own students. I hope these kids hang up on your fundraising calls.
Yeah, not my president, but you know what else was embarrassing to witness?
Painful and embarrassing to witness?
Yeah.
What?
6 episodes of The Idol.
Zing!
Yeah, The Idol sucked. It was painful and embarrassing to watch, especially when your mom's sitting next to you.
And talk about cancel culture. David Zaslav is literally canceling culture. The jokes just write themselves, people. Well, not really. No, you need a team of writers to write the jokes. But in this case, that was a metaphor. So Robert, the president of Boston University, in this op-ed, he continues saying that his students being in solidarity with the WGA as being indicative of the divisions in our country and efforts focused on generating material to post on social media. Solidarity with strikers is it's a bedrock of our fucking country. You're the one being divisive, and I'm sorry it made you uncomfortable. For what it's worth, Brown makes $2 million as the president of BU, though he's retiring this year. Good riddance. I think a lot about this from like a social perspective. Like, how is it possible for David Zaslav to get up in front of thousands and have them boo you and then think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to double down. Because here's what David Zaslav says about what would bring an end to the strike. He says this on Squawk Box. He says, I think it's a love for the business. It's a love for working. We all came into this business because we love storytelling. Almost all of us got into this business with a lot of sacrifice in order to be part of that journey. And so that's what's going to bring us together. How detached from reality must you be to use the words like us and sacrifice in the same sentence when you just took home $1/3 of $1 billion last year? You are fucking tripping.
So you guys want to play my favorite game now? Let's look at David's real estate properties to see how down to earth he really is.
Adam loves. This is the real estate minute with Adam.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start on the West Coast. So David just recently bought a 3,800 square foot home, the former home of Bob Evans, former studio exec of Paramount, and convicted cocaine trafficker.
Wait.
Any relation to the breakfast
That's what
mogul?
That's what I was wondering as well. I don't know. I assume so, right?
How many Bob Evans must there be?
There's got to be one. It's one, right? So we paid $16 million for that. So that's for his, R.A. Emanuel, right, Michael Ovitz parties. Then a couple years ago, he was selling his 7,000 square foot, $18 million rent controlled Greenwich Village townhouse. Because, everyone's got one of those.
Right.
Bob Evans is not the Bob Evans from Bob Evans.
Oh.
Bob Evans was a southeastern Ohio sausage maker.
That makes sense. Ohio seems right.
Yeah. That's the only place I've ever been to a Bob Evans.
Yeah, Pittsburgh
Ohio.
For me.
Yeah.
And then in 2012, he became neighbors with Martha Stewart, Carl Icahn, and David Geffen, paying a cool $20 $24.65 million for his Hamptons Flophouse.
South of the highway?
South of the highway, always. Are you kidding me? That's not even real. Nobody lives north of the highway. Nobody who matters.
Right.
Finally, in 2010, David paid his friend, little wealth transfer to the wealthy, Conan O'Brien, $25 million for an Upper West Side duplex, 7-bed, 8.5 bath. A lot of people have those,
Yeah.
They get passed down generation to generation. I'm sure a lot of us.
Just like us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Important to use.
Yeah.
Just like us.
Right. So that's what's going to bring us together.
Yeah.
So the thing that I think is interesting, though, is like when there's a strike and you're like, I have these two important things that I want to do this summer. I want to give the commencement speech at Boston University, and I want to have a party at
I want to throw a fucking Raising Cane's chicken party.
And I want to throw an amazing party at Cannes. You just realize that these guys live in completely different realities. You can create an alternate reality for yourself. Or maybe you just don't give a shit. What do I care if 10,000
Does
students
this guy look like he's tethered to reality?
No. So then we have the party at Cannes. So here's a quote from the Wall Street Journal. One of the guests looked out to 2 mega yachts in the distance at David Zaslav's Cannes party and goes, "This is what a recession looks like. There used to be 20 of these." So he was warned. People said, "Hey, Dave, maybe you shouldn't be bopping around in your $1,000 Loro Piana loafers and drinking Dom Hunger Games style." But what was Zaslav supposed to do? Go to the next page. Oh, here we go. There's Lily Rose Depp.
She looks thrilled, by the way.
He was planning this party for a year. He made what he described as a clear-eyed decision to go ahead with the party, telling Vanity Fair that he knew it would probably be used against him. And his defense was, "I've been working hard for this party," Mr. Zaslav said with a grin to a reporter that night. Fuck you.
Look at Lily Rose Depp. She's got like this look of disgust with her vape in one hand.
What are they eating? It looks like some type of chicken ravioli. And their rolls
looks like
are...
the Olive Garden is catering.
Why are there rolls with no plate? There's no plates under the rolls. The rolls are just set down onto the tablecloth.
Look at all the glasses.
The best they could do for centerpieces is a Batman popcorn bucket.
A Batman lamp.
Seriously. So he's not alone in having total blinders on and creating the reality that he wants instead of the reality that actually exists. Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, in an interview at Sun Valley, by the way, Sun Valley is a media finance retreat for rich idiots hosted by private equity firm Allen & Company. A lot of the pictures that we use on this podcast are paparazzi shots from Sun Valley. Anyway, Bob Iger said, "There's a level of expectation that the writers have that is just not realistic. And they're adding to a set of challenges that this business is already facing that is quite frankly very disruptive and dangerous." Dangerous? Get fucked. Fran Dresser, who's famously the SAG president, called them both land barons of a medieval time.
How would Fran Drescher say it?
Land barons of a medieval time. Oh my God. Oh God.
Are you ready for...
That sounded like Daffy Duck, Adam.
Oh God. What?
Are you ready for the next and last piece of corporate gossip? You can go to the next picture, Mike. So the last piece of corporate gossip is, "You can't keep getting away with this, Zaslav," shakes fists in air. Do you think that David Zaslav read till the end of the Jack Welch story? And devoted listeners of our podcast knows what happens at the end. But if David Zaslav read, he would know that Welch was just painting gold over a stinky turd. And his legacy of cost cutting is one of the reasons why his face is on the front of the book titled "The Man Who Broke Capitalism." During the last Warner Brothers Discovery earnings calls, the CFO, his name is Gunnar, says that Warner Brothers Discovery had saved more than $100 million due to the strikes in Q2. And like, I understand fine. I know you have to spin it for shareholders. Like, you're not going to be like, "This sucks," whatever. But it's like, I'm confused why there's seemingly no pushback from shareholders to push the other way on this. Like, I have a tough time believing that all shareholders, if you're a shareholder in Warner Brothers Discovery or Disney, you probably like movies. You probably understand the product more than Zaslav does. So why is there no pushback? I don't believe that every shareholder feels the same way Zaslav and Iger do. Anyway, the CFO Weidenfeld goes on to say, should the strikes run through the end of the year, I would expect several $100 million of upside to our free cash flow. Girl math. Girl math.
That's what I was
Girl
going
math.
as, corporate girl math. Okay, so let's go through this together. So how long is the writer's strike going for? Oh, so it's pure profit. It's pure profit right there.
You're making money on this.
You're making money. Okay, David, what else? Oh, ChatGPT, yeah, throw that in there. That's all profit.
Just to make the math clear,
The girl math.
The girl math. Several $100 million, even if they did have that upside on their free cash flow, is a literal drop in the bucket compared to all the debt that Zaslav has to pay down. He's paid $9 billion. He still has $48 billion of debt to go. And we did get a big juggernaut in Barbie. That grossed $1 billion. But again, it's like not much in the scheme of things. Zaslav is back to laying off workers. There was just another layoff in August. So.
Girl math. Girl math. Girl math. Girl math. Girl math.
What is that podcast actually called?
I don't know. I think it's like the way it looks like on TikTok. It looks like a radio show, like an Australian radio show.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's not a podcast. It's the vintage podcast.
Terrestrial radio.
That's right. So, are you ready for the takeaways?
Yeah, give me them.
I find it really interesting that a Warner-related merger might be the downfall of 3 different CEOs, Ted Turner, Chris Licht, and maybe David Zaslav. Here's my free advice for you. If you're a CEO in the future, I'd say stay as far away as possible from Warner Media, unless you just want a golden parachute. And if you don't care about your reputation, then fucking go for it. What are your takeaways?
As a consumer, I'm really annoyed with the product. Max is like just so hard. There's too much. It's so they've aggregated everything. Now it's just like it's too much. I have to go through things and be like, okay, this kind of looks good, and then I watch it and I'm like, all right, I just wasted an hour trying to get into a show. I'm a big HBO Go guy. Just give me that.
I remember
Let's
HBO
go back to HBO Go. I don't want HBO Max. I don't want Max. I definitely don't want Max. I don't want HBO Max. I want HBO Go. And they do have a subsection for HBO, but it still gives you a bunch of shit.
Well, I think it's only unfortunately going to get worse as this writer's strike continues. Their only option is to basically pull from whatever they have in the backlog or continue to make shows like 90 Day Fiancé, make a 40th spinoff of that show.
What about Mayor from Cyborg Town?
What's that? Oh, yeah. AI
the ChatGPT version.
Well, we really haven't seen the trickle down of what it's going to be. This fall programming is where, because spring and summer is where they're really like getting into the filming, and a lot of things got cut off from filming.
What's the lead time? So we expect to start seeing a real dropping WGA, SAG content.
Summer is when they do a lot of shooting for fall and holiday.
Yeah.
So you're going to see a lot of drop off of the holiday stuff. Like all the winter shows you see for like Hallmark and all that stuff, those are going to be probably not happening because they wouldn't have been able to film them. So we haven't seen it yet, but we'll really see the destruction of quality written content come this fall/winter.
This is the first time, by the way, in 6 years that both of these unions have struck together. I hope that this hot labor summer continues. We have the UAW that just announced a strike yesterday. We have SAG and...
Big UPS win.
We have SAG and WGA. And I think what's really interesting too? There have been a number of CEOs who've just started saying unhinged things with their full throat. Like that Australian CEOs were like, a lot of employees were feeling like their employer was lucky to have them and it needs to be the other way around. Or the CEO of Frontier Airlines, Barry Beifel, who I did a TikTok about and who I'm actually evidence in a lawsuit against. He's saying that people have become lazy and all this stuff. And a lot of the things that I think CEOs would have said behind closed doors, they're just now becoming like so anxious and nervous. I think about the solidarity that's happening among the working class, that they are just like freaking out and saying insane things. I think that hopefully they will continue to stick their foot in mouth, and it will only give writers and other strikers encouragement to keep going, because these guys, I'm telling you, these CEOs are so fucking dumb. I think this could be, I've been kind of like waiting for a turning point, and I think if this strike becomes ultimately as successful, this SAG and WGA strike, it could be give a lot of energy to future strikes going forward. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you, Adam, for being here. Thank you for listening. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by buying us a coffee. When you buy us a coffee, those funds go to all of our subscriptions that we pay for. So we do, 40 hours of research per episode. And all of that research is like The Atlantic. We have to pay for that. We have to pay for Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg and all of these other news sources.
The Daily Wire.
What's the Daily Wire?
It's a Republican.
Not that one. So that's where those funds go. And a great way to support us is by liking this podcast. Give it 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or share it with a friend. Share it with 2 friends. Start a multi-level marketing scheme where you share this podcast with 5 friends and then they share it with 5 friends.
If you listen to the show, just head over to the YouTube and just hit the like button, even if you've already listened to it, because it just helps the show get their numbers and get everything up and moving.
Smash that like button on YouTube, because now we're on YouTube. And you can watch Adam and I, and sometimes Sandy and Frankie, and you can see all the pictures that we talk about. If you want to check out the articles that we mentioned or look at the pictures that we discussed during this podcast, including a very unsettling photo of David Zaslav winking into the camera and pointing with finger guns, you can do so by clicking the Substack link in our bio. I think that's it. Is that it for show notes?
David Zaslav may have predicted Aaron Rodgers getting injured.
We haven't even talked about that.
Yeah.
That was weird, and I loved it.
I loved it too. There's something there if somebody wants to look into it and send us some notes.
Send us some notes. If you know anything about the David Zaslav Twitter account that predicted with frightening accuracy that Aaron Rodgers was going to break his Achilles tendon at the exact right time, send us a letter.
His Aaron Rodgers' guarantee is if he never plays again, $1 million a second that he played this season.
Wow.
He was on field for 75 seconds, and he has a $75 million guarantee.
Wow. What a contract. SAG, you should
yeah, really
look into getting that contract. Send us a letter. Send us a note to Becca@nighttoast.com or Adam@nighttoast.com. I love hearing from you guys. I get a lot of just gossip that you guys want to share with me, and I love getting it. It's like Christmas morning when I get it. Just so you guys know, I keep a pretty tight lid on the email. I won't ever share anything that you guys send me because I just don't share things that aren't corroborated by like a second source, like a reputable news outlet. So if you just want to email me and share some gossip, I love it. I'll email you back and we can chat. Anyway, I think that's it. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Bye. On September 26, 2023, after this episode was recorded, the WGA ended their strike when their union representative struck a deal with studios. The deal is big. WGA West President David Goodman said, "The deal is exceptional in that it is something that will protect writers, not just now, but in the future." In the end, Zaslav and his buddies at Netflix and Disney ponied up the cash and met all of the writers' demands. No amount of pissing and moaning about the unrealistic demands of the writers and actors would discourage the strikers. They knew that the execs needed them. Warner Brothers Discovery had just reduced their earnings target by $300 million, and as you know, Zaz doesn't have a ton of wiggle room. As DJ Khaled says, congratulations, you played yourself. As of today, September 29th, the actors are still on strike, though this outcome could be an inspiring blueprint for SAG negotiations, and the WGA is still supporting SAG on the picket line. It seems fitting, doesn't it? After all, at the end of Heavyweights, the campers band together and banish the movie's villain, Tony Perkis, and take back summer camp. Hopefully, the next step is for somebody to take away the keys of the camp from David Zaslav.